Hello guys, this is your friend Shinobi Addict 2.0 and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is What If Naruto Builds Secret Relationship with Tsunade Part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. Unsuspecting as she wasn't all that surprised when her little blonde genin busted through her door and made a beeline for her. Wah! Tsunade started to protest, being stopped by one of his hands clamped to her mouth. Please hide me, he pleaded, his eyes watering and lip turned up in a pout. Tsunade gave a slight nod of her head and the boy huddled behind her chair as promised. Before she had the chance to turn and ask what he was hiding from, the large hulking bulk of an oh-so-familiar pervert barreled into her office, breathing heavily with his hands anchored on his knees. He looked up at her, his onyx eyes boring into her honey brown. Did Naruto come through here? He managed to get out between pants. Tsunade was about to tell Jiraiya no, but with her curiosity piqued and the large stack of paperwork looming before her, procrastination sounded like a good idea. Why are you looking for him? Tsunade asked innocently, even batting an eyelash or two to get the desired effect on the man before her. Because told me a lame joke, Jiraiya answered honestly. Tsunade felt her blood pressure rise at the infantile reason, and slowly began to reach back for the boy behind her chair and give him away, but her eyes fell upon her paperwork. What was the joke? Said the procrastinator. Jiraiya froze at the question, his eyes diverting to areas other than her. It's really stupid, nothing worthy of the Hokage and all her grace. Jiraiya sped through his words in one breath. Knowing he was lying, Tsunade sent Jiraiya the look, do you want to be castrated with a dull knife? Kind of look. Knowing the look all too well, Jiraiya gave a microscopic shake of his head and then sighed in defeat. Well, Naruto said that if we were a family, me being the father and you the mother, Jiraiya started out a bit shaky. That it would be super dysfunctional and we would end up killing each other. He finished quickly and closed his eyes in the practiced manner he picked up from years of having to receive cruel and unusual punishment from the woman sitting calmly at her desk. Tsunade sat quietly in shock for a bit, remembering the day before when she had done something she never thought she would do. Naruto had sprung into her office, unannounced of course, and had invited her to dinner with him. At first she sat with a manicured brow arched in confusion, then realized the boy's version of dinner meant a few, being generous here, bowls of that Ichiraku ramen he was always aving about. The boy was still strained in some ungodly pose, waiting for her answer when she finally giggled a yes and left her office with him jumping out of his shoes, ready for ramen. After 3 bowls for her and 5 for him, the two sat at the bar in utter exhaustion from their meal. Tsunade was getting ready to pay, Naruto pulling out his own frog wallet to pay for his share when the old man came up to the counter. No. These are on the house, he said with a hand raised, signaling for no arguing. Sweet. Thanks, old man, Naruto chirped. Well, the only reason they're free is because of your date here. Tsuki laughed with his head cocked towards Tsunade. Oh, please. Tsunade laughed at the old man and his joke, Naruto grumbling a bit in the corner. With thanks being yelled back, the two started walking away to their respective homes, the trail coming to a fork and the two having to go separate ways. Thank you for the meal, Naruto. I haven't eaten like that in years. Tsunade giggled when she remembered herself slurping down those enormous 3 bowls. No problem, Ba-chan. It was better because it was free. Naruto gave her a devious wink and a pat on his pocket where his wallet lay, still plump and prosperous. She was about to leave when she saw something on his face, a dried drop of broth on his cheek. Don't you know how to use a napkin? Tsunade lightly scolded and Naruto gave her a befuddled look. What? He asked, a bit scared. Come here. Tsunade ushered him with her hand and Naruto took a few steps forward until he was nearly 10 inches away from her. Tsunade licked her thumb inconspicuously enough and leaned down to meet his level, he was still so short. Taking his chin in her hand, she rubbed away the blemish with her wet thumb. Almost not realizing what she was doing, Naruto jumped back at the touch. Ew. Gross. That's your spit. Don't do that. He shrieked as he slapped a hand to his offending cheek. Well, at least you don't look stupid. Tsunade growled, annoyed that he reacted like that after she did him a favor, ungrateful brat. Great. Thanks. But now I look like a baby. He called back, a small blush forming on his face from the foreign maternal gesture. Better that than stupid. She lashed back with her sharp tongue, eyes gleaming with the sparkle of victory. Naruto knew he was caught and felt his blush deepen, quickly turning away to go home. Thank you, he grumbled back as he headed home, the tiniest of smiles tugging on his lips as he held his cheek. You're welcome, brat, Tsunade called back, turning to go home and shaking her head. Ooh, I didn't mean it like that. Tsunade defended out of the blue. What? Jiraiya, confused as to what she meant. Tsunade reached back and grabbed the boy by the back of his fluorescent orange jacket and lifted him to her level. Naruto also wore a dumbfounded look. His sparkling cerulean orbs fixed themselves on her brow in an attempt to decipher just what she meant. You just had something on your face, Tsunade said, and Naruto gasped in realization, brow furrowing in defense. Well, that's what it felt like, woman. That's what I see mothers doing to their kids, Naruto defended. Tsunade nearly dropped him after his last few words. You really think of me that way? Tsunade asked softly, a tear brimming in her eye. Well, yeah, sure, he said nonchalantly while he put his hands behind his head. You're always yelling at me like Shikamaru's mom, and you always make sure I'm eating right like Choji's mom, although I'm not eating as much as Choji's mom lets him, but still. And, the rest of his reasons seemed to dissipate before they reached her ears. She could only hear the thrumming of her heart as she stared at the boy she held by the collar. This was new, something she wasn't exactly expecting to hear when he first busted into her office. Tsunade gently put him back on the floor when he finished and looked to Jiraiya. He was smiling at the boy's revelations. That was really sweet, Naruto, Jiraiya said when Naruto was secure on the ground. Jiraiya looked back to Tsunade, noting the lost look on her face and the smile she was trying to hide. But then her expression suddenly turned violent and she regained her vice grip on Naruto's collar, bringing him to her face until their noses nearly touched. Dysfunctional, she growled and a few of her knuckles cracked for emphasis. Yeah, because you and pervy Sage are always fighting and yelling at each other. And you're always threatening to castrate him. What does that even mean? Naruto shot back. And where do you fit into all of this? Tsunade growled at Naruto, inwardly slapping herself for getting into an argument over pretend things. Naruto looked hurt, but then quickly fixed himself to where it was like she had never said anything. Well, I kinda look like you, Naruto muttered with his arms crossed over his chest. Do not, Tsunade grumbled, and Naruto shot up in surprise. Yeah, huh, he said and gently grabbed a lock of her hair and compared it to his as he leaned his head in to meet his little spikes with her locks. Tsunade looked at them for a second, nearly letting loose the grumble she was holding in. Same color, nearly the same shade. But that didn't prove anything. That's just a genetic trait that can pop up in a family full of brunettes, she retorted matter-of-factly and pulled her hair out of his hand and set him back on the floor. You're just making stuff up so you can go around saying you look like a gorgeous woman such as myself. Tsunade snarked as Naruto gave a huff. Whatever, Ba-chan. At least I'm not married to a pervert. Naruto shot back before he ran out of her office, narrowly avoiding a fairly large book to his head. Jiraiya had ducked behind a chair, in fear of Tsunade's wrath as he watched the woman seethe. She turned to the only remaining occupant, casting a deathly glare at him. Get out. Tsunade rumbled and Jiraiya quickly stood and headed for the door. No problem, honey buns. He shot back with a grin and narrowly dodged Tsunade's chair as it was hurled his way. With her chair in pieces and her temper hot, Tsunade opened her bottom drawer and pulled out the bottle of sake her palate was craving. My husband and son make me want to drink. She muttered and popped off the cork. She sat at her window, staring out at her village with a cup of tea in her hands, casually sipping as she stared. The busty blonde was waiting for her misfit boys to come home, her dysfunctional family. Her honey brown eyes scanned the streets lined with people bustling here and there. She quickly glanced over towards the academy, smiling when she saw the little kids playing out front. Taking another sip, she sighed and took her seat, patience wearing thin. His letter had said they'd be back today by noon. It was already 3. The frustrated blonde melted back into her chair and played with one of her bangs, twirling the soft silk-like locks between her nimble fingers. She did this for some time, mockingly glancing at her large stacks of paperwork and the pen lying next to them. Lady Tsunade. A woman's voice permeated through the heavy door with a few knocks. Come in, Shizune. Tsunade called and the brunette popped her head in, her deep black eyes brimming with something that looked like excitement. Tsunade took immediate notice at her assistant's glee. They're here, milady. Shizune announced rather bubbly as she opened the door wider for Tsunade to dash out, her tea left forgotten on her desk. Finally, Tsunade breathed to herself, agitation evident, but a smile playing at her lips. Ooh, ah, man, I'm so hungry, pervy sage. The blonde teen whined as he neared the gates of his birth village, a hand over his grumbling stomach. The tall white-haired man walking next to him only smiled at the boy's whining. Once we get in, you can eat all the ramen you can manage. His deep voice bellowed as the teen started a violent dash towards his village, newfound ambition in his legs as they pumped him closer and closer towards his beloved ramen. Deal, pervy sage. You're buying. He shouted with his head turned back towards his master, unaware of the coming obstacle standing in his way. Naruto. A loud, feminine voice called out and he whipped his head forward at the sound of his name, then smacking his face into something soft. His face fell into something rivaling the softness of a cloud. Naruto buried his head deeper into the cushion-like thing before him and drank the scent that came with it, powdery flowers and pungent fruit. Standing next to Tsunade, Shizune was bright red as she watched Naruto basically motorboat Tsunade. The Sannin herself was staring down at the teenager with a glare of annoyance crossing over into mirth. It would be another few seconds before the pervert made his way over, nearly toppling himself over when he started bleeding from his nose at the sight of his student burying himself in the sacred mounds that were Tsunade's. Hey kiddo, what are you doing? Tsunade whispered with a hint of annoyance as Naruto suddenly stopped, cerulean eyes gone wide and a violent blush burning across his face. Recognizing the voice immediately, he jumped nearly 10 feet back and tensed into a defensive stance. Hey Ba-chan. What's shaken? Naruto smiled nervously as he watched the older woman carefully, still constrained in some ungodly position, waiting for her imminent retaliation. Instead of violently beating her boy to a pulp, Tsunade took a deep breath and fixed her shirt, a small smile on her face. As she did. Nothing much, Naruto. She chuckled as she looked him over. God, he had gotten big. His spikes had gotten longer. Some of the baby fat she adored so much had vanished and left sharp, handsome features in their wake. His frame was leaner and more muscular, but still covered in that blasphemous orange. Welcome home. She called out to him softly and pulled him into a hug. Naruto was a bit shocked. He was checking himself over, making sure she hadn't numbed him to where he couldn't feel it when she chopped off his arm or something. But when he felt her soft hands cup the back of his head, he knew she meant no harm. Thanks Ba-chan, he breathed into her shoulder with a smile. Tsunade held the hug for a few more seconds and then pulled away from him, her hands on his shoulders. Geez, you got taller. Now I'm gonna have to jump to smack the back of your head. Tsunade laughed with Naruto as Jiraiya came closer. Do I get a hug? He asked Tsunade lecherously, his best creepy smile plastered to his face. Tsunade's smile sharply turned to a frown as she directed her laser beam-like glare at her old teammate. Jiraiya's grin disappeared and his shoulders slumped in defeat. He nearly jumped when he felt her arm wrap around his waist. I missed you too, you big teddy bear. Tsunade sighed in defeat as she side-hugged Jiraiya. Ah, thanks Tsunade. The feeling's mutual. The old sage went to wrap his hand around Tsunade's waist when she elbowed him. There will be no further contact. She growled as she slinked away from his large frame and back over to Naruto and Shizune, Naruto wearing a devious smile on his face. Gosh, you guys know spouses shouldn't fight, he sniggered evilly as his lips turned up into a kissy face. Oh gosh, Naruto. If someone hit you hard enough, that face could stick. Tsunade minutely warned with a platinum smile plastered to her face. Before the boy could give a what, Tsunade walked up to him and slapped the back of his head. Hard. OWW. Naruto howled as he grabbed the back of his head. Oh, would you look at that? Guess I don't have to jump after all. Come on Ba-chan, that mission's gay. Naruto whined as he stood next to his teammate and sensei, Sakura's face burning a bright red. Young man, you do realize who you're whining to? Tsunade breathed, her air annoyed as it came out. She sat at her semicircle of desks, other old people assembled in the room to help give out missions. Yeah, but Kamoon, stop whining. You remind me of a baby. Tsunade growled and watched as Naruto flashed his puppy dog eyes. Ignoring him completely, Tsunade began to hand the mission paper over to Kakashi when the doors burst open. It was Shizune. Jesus Christ, what is it now? Tsunade yelled as her assistant came hurrying up to her. We've just received word from Suna, the cage has been kidnapped by the Akatsuki. Shizune announced through pants. Tsunade watched as Naruto's eyes widened as he turned to her, cerulean boring into honey. Knowing the history, Tsunade couldn't help but cave in under that stare. But apprehension held her fast. Akatsuki, how many? Tsunade looked to Shizune with an expecting gaze. 2. It seems from Lord Jiraiya's reports that they always come in a pair. Tsunade lowered her eyes and stared at the mission in her hand. Although she'd rather run around the village before admitting it, the thought of Naruto out there, fightin' against notorious criminals scared her to no end. Tsunade looked to Naruto. Fine, damn it, she took back the paper and addressed the squad. Team Kakashi, I amend your mission. You are to head for Sand immediately and provide whatever assistance needed. Tsunade ordered, her unease evident in her body language. Gotcha Ba-chan. Naruto hollered back as he ran to the door, quickly followed by Sakura and Kakashi. Tsunade's eyes followed the little red swirl on his jacket until he was out of sight, and then she released her long-held breath. Ooh, alrighty, we're heading out. Naruto announced as he pulled on his pack, ignorant to the fact Kakashi was still the leader of their squad, thus making him the announcer of their departure. I'll keep him whole and hearty for you, Lady Tsunade. Sakura chirped as she gave her master a salute. Thank you Sakura. That means a lot. Tsunade weakly smiled. I don't need Sakura to babysit me. I can take care of myself. Naruto interjected, incensed. Well, at least Sakura doesn't blow her top on every little thing and then gets herself into sticky situations like you do. Tsunade scolded as her and Naruto stood inches from each other's face. That's the pot calling the kettle black. A boisterous voice filled with mirth echoed in the space before the village gate. Both blondes wore a look of surprise as they simultaneously turned to the source of the voice. Jiraiya had, literally, dropped in and was wearing an amused smile as he stared at the two. Yeah, you pot. Naruto retorted with his pointer finger shoved in Tsunade's face, hovering right before her nose. She glared at him and could feel the vein in her temple throb. She grabbed his finger with a few of hers and held it in her hand. I have perfectly good reasons for being the way that I am. One of them is staring me in the face. Tsunade growled as she squeezed Naruto's fingers. OWW. Quit it, Ba-chan. That hurts. Naruto squealed and freed his fingers from her iron grip. Oh, gosh. Looks like you're injured. I guess I can't send you on that mission. No way, Ba-chan. I'm gonna go rescue Gaara if it's the last thing I do. Naruto huffed defiantly as he watched Tsunade. The tips of her cheeks were a light shade of pink and her eyes were focused on him. Knowing she was defeated, she sighed heavily and closed her eyes. Just be careful, that temper will be the death of you, she added softly and patted his cheek. Naruto smiled and turned to the gate, his hands pulling on the straps of his headband as he tightened it. Naruto. It was Jiraiya this time. Yeah. He waited as Jiraiya searched for the right words, the older man's dark onyx eyes watching the blonde. Listen to Tsunade. Be careful. He said with a smile as he stood next to Tsunade, the woman now lightly chewing on her thumbnail. I will. Soccer is babysitting me, remember. Naruto teased as he darted off with his team, leaving his doting surrogate parents to worry. I should have broken an arm or something. I don't want him out there. Tsunade muttered to Jiraiya, her eyes still trained on Naruto's frame as it got smaller and smaller as he got farther and farther away from her. Jiraiya looked down at her with thoughtful eyes. Oh, poor mama bear. Don't worry, your cub will be fine. Jiraiya laughed, then coughed when Tsunade smacked him in the gut. You can just burn in hell, you shriveled up old perv. Tsunade muttered darkly as she walked away. I need a drink, she growled. I can get you one. Jiraiya appeared by her side wearing a lecherous grin and waving a few bills in front of her. She gave him a quick glance, then the money, and then back to him. Fine, damn it, she grunted as she walked with him to the nearest restaurant, hiding her tiny smile from him the entire trip. She sat at her desk while her pen furiously scribbled away at the last piece of paperwork on her desk. With exultant haste, she signed her name on the very last dotted line and flung the pen from her fingers where it flipped a few times and landed near the edge of her desk. Ha! Tsunade laughed triumphantly as she handed the paper to Shizune, who wore a timid smile as her master shook the paper in front of her face. I finished all my paperwork. Tsunade sang happily as Shizune took the last piece of paper from her hand and placed it in the folder in her arms. Yes you did, Lady Tsunade, and before poor Shizune could finish, Tsunade had risen from her chair and had her hands on the desk. And that means I have the rest of the day off. So my dear Shizune, peace. Tsunade chirped as she disappeared in a puff of smoke, leaving Shizune to sigh in defeat as she went to file the last document. Ooh, oh, this is gonna be good, Naruto. Tsunade chuckled as she took off her green coat and stripped down to her new bathing suit, an itsy bitsy teeny whiny yellow polka dot bikini. Naruto was standing guard in his new light green board shorts, eyes trained on his surroundings. You bet Ba-chan, this was a great idea. Nobody can bug us if they don't know where we are. And pervy Sage would never think of looking there. Naruto sniggered lightly as he turned back to see if she was ready yet. Okay, Tsunade said as she slipped back into her coat, all commando-like. Let's move. With that said, the two blondes made a dash for the nearby rocks and into the rainforest. When Tsunade was deep enough into the forest, Naruto was losing track of her because her green coat blended in with the foliage so much, she seemed to phase in and out of the dimension. The two went farther and farther into the rainforest, the air a bit humid and thick. Come on, kiddo. It's just ahead. Tsunade announced cheerfully as she leapt from a rock and into a nearby tree. Wow. I didn't think you were still so agile, Ba-chan. Was that an old joke? Tsunade turned around and hissed. No. It's just you sit at your desk all day and you don't get much exercise. Tsunade was glaring at Naruto now, and as dense as the boy was, he knew to stop while he was ahead. Never mind. He landed on the same rock and sprung up to meet her in the tree. Unknown to him there was Slime Co. aiding the branch. Before Tsunade could warn him, Naruto landed on the branch but started to fall forward, watching the big boulder get closer and closer as he closed his eyes. But before he got anywhere near the rock, Tsunade's hands caught him under his arms and held him before he fell face first. Naruto opened his eyes and looked up to Tsunade, who was hanging upside down from the offending tree branch. Old and out of shape my butt. Tsunade smirked as she gently let Naruto land on the ground. Thanks Ba-chan. Naruto mumbled as his feet made touchdown with the ground. Moments later, Tsunade gracefully landed next to him, her hair flying around her face a bit as her head turned to her left. We're here, she said excitedly as she took hold of Naruto's arm and gently pulled him along. And like a curious little boy, Naruto followed her with eager haste. Passing through a patch of bushes, negotiating an obstacle or two, and the two finally found their sanctuary. Whoa! Naruto awed at the sight before him. Tucked away in a patch of boulders and mangrove trees, a freshwater spring sat, looking tranquil and welcoming. My grandpa would take me here almost every week of the summer and we'd relax and fish and go exploring. When I was older, he brought me here to learn how to walk on water. I love this place, and I've never brought anyone here. Tsunade looked back to Naruto with a soft, welcoming smile. It's a secret, so you can't tell anyone. Got it? Yes, ma'am. Naruto nodded and started making his way down the stone steps. He quickly looked towards Tsunade with a smile. In all the years, out of all the people she's known, he's been the only one she's invited to her secret spring. If that doesn't make you feel special, nothing else will. What are you doing? Naruto was pulled from his thoughts when he saw Tsunade throw her coat on a branch and climb on a rock. Cannonball. What else? She jumped and curled herself into a ball, splashing into the water and sending waves everywhere, including over by Naruto. He stood there, drenched, as he waited for her to surface. When she did, he put on his best grumpy face and watched her laugh. Oh come on, Grumpy. You're gonna get wet anyway. Tsunade laughed as she pulled the hair ties from her long blonde tresses. Fine. Naruto huffed as he ran and jumped, landing inches from Tsunade and splashing water in her face. When he surfaced, he noticed her cheeks were full. What? Tsunade squirted water into his face as he just stayed still, taking it. Punk! She chuckled and went under, her legs kicking and sending her deeper. Naruto, curious, took a deep breath and went in after her. Tsunade swam until she reached an underwater cliff. It was tiny and looked a bit like a cave. She reached a hand under the stony outstretched part of it, and pulled out a pre-pumped water tube. It shot to the surface, taking Naruto with it. Tsunade reached under again and let another one rise to the surface. Cool. Naruto laughed as he wiggled onto the donut. Then bubbles started surfacing and suddenly, another donut popped up. This one was a light red with white stripes painting the sides. Tsunade broke the surface of the water and took a deep breath, then climbed into her red donut. The two blondes sat, gliding on the water, Naruto playing bumper donuts and Tsunade squirting water in his face. Then, Naruto had tried ramming Tsunade's donut into one of the boulders surrounding the spring, but her foot blocked him in time and made him slide off of his donut and toppling into the water. Ah ha ha! You fell in, Tsunade teased tiredly as Naruto popped to the surface and grabbed hold of Hai. floaty. When Tsunade didn't hear the squeaking that comes with trying to get back up on a rubber floaty, she turned to see Naruto resting on his tube right next to her hand. Thanks for bringing me. Naruto smiled as he lightly bumped into her raft again. Tsunade smiled as she lolled her head in his direction, placing her hand on his head and lightly tousling his hair. His spikes were so soft, reminding her of her own blonde locks. No problem, kiddo. I'd rather have you than Jiraiya any day. Tsunade laughed and leaned over to kiss the top of Naruto's head. Yeah, I have to agree. My nose doesn't bleed when I look at you half. Naruto added smartly and Tsunade laughed. Exactly. Lady Tsunade. I think this could be a trap. Shizune added nervously, dark eyes darting from the blonde to the pinkette next to her. If it's a trap, then we fight. Sakura said adamantly, eyes intensely trained on her master. Tsunade sat on the railing of the Hokage mansion, quite as her hair swayed in the wind around her. She finally took a deep breath and answered both pupils. That would be fine, but you forget Kakashi will be out of commission for over a week now, and you only have 6 more days left. She paused, looking in Sakura's eyes. The only sensible idea would be to form a new team. Lady Tsunade. Shizune interjected worriedly, Tsunade looking up and meeting her eyes. In that case, why not just send another cell? You could send Sakura along with them and I feel Naruto should be removed from this mission. Tsunade was quiet as she absorbed her assistant's words, eyes downcast. Sakura watched her master, the apprehension rolling off her in waves. I'm in complete agreement with you, Shizune. Both women were caught off guard by the older woman's words. It scares me to death to think that I'd be intentionally sending Naruto out to fight the monsters that want him most. But everyone stiffened. In regards to sending another team, I highly doubt they'd succeed. This wouldn't be just another mission for Naruto and Sakura. Sasuke is more than a teammate, he's their friend. The finality in her words was enough for Shizune to focus her eyes on her feet, courage shriveling. Understood, but I still feel that Naruto. What do you think Naruto would say about this? Tsunade looked up at the shadow above her, smiling when the atrocious orange violated her eyes. Both women standing with her looked up in time to hear him speak. Ba-chan, we need some new teammates. Naruto announced and leapt from his perch, somersaulting in the air and landing on the railing next to Tsunade. Sound good? Tsunade asked him with a smile, her head turned to meet his glistening cerulean eyes. Hell yeah, he chirped and readied himself for takeoff, but his feet never left the railing. Tsunade's arm was wrapped around his middle and pulling him down. Hold it, you little punk, she said and pulled him down onto the platform with her, Shizune, and Sakura. With a few muttered curses and unintelligible grumblings, Naruto was securely on the platform. You're always so impatient, Tsunade scolded. You're always so bossy. Naruto snapped and folded his arms over his chest, missing the vein pulsing in Tsunade's temple. That's because I am the boss. She growled under her breath. Anyway, I'm going to fill the 2 vacancies left by Kakashi and Sasuke. So you're welcome, I just saved you some time. But, are they gonna be weirdas? Come on Ba-chan. Lemme pick 'em. Naruto clapped his hands together and closed his eyes. No. Tsunade announced and bopped him on the head. Ow. Naruto yelped and rubbed the back of his head. I still don't have to jump, kiddo. When did you say that growth spurt would hit? Tsunade teased as she turned to leave the rooftop, stopping abruptly when she saw one of her counselors. Tsunade. She sounded like a nagging mother. Ah, crap. Tsunade grumbled as she made the motion to dart off the building, stopping when she felt a hand grab her green coat. She snapped her blonde head around to see the shriveled up old Kaharu holding her back, her face blank like nothing had even happened. Come with me please, we need to talk. She said calmly and evenly, her vice grip never wavering. Ha. Ha! Ba-chan got caught. Naruto laughed as he held his gut. Tsunade glared at him, ready to open her mouth and bark his ear off when she was pulled off balance. Be quiet, young man. You're no longer needed. Leave. Naruto stopped laughing and got quiet, a look of hurt spreading across his face. Don't talk to him like that. Tsunade glared at the older woman and swatted her hand from her coat. And don't touch me, Tsunade warned as she walked past Kaharu. Go get some ramen or something, Naruto. This won't take long. Tsunade turned back to face him, gaze soft as she watched him stick a forced smile on his face. Sure. He was gone. Satisfied, Tsunade turned back to Kaharu, brows knitted in anger as she disappeared into the darkness of the doorway. Kaharu was silent as she followed the Hokage inside, Shizune not far behind. We'll talk later, Sakura. Shizune added sweetly, eyes saying otherwise. Sakura wasn't convinced as she left the building to tend to her sensei. Ooh, hey, kid. Jiraiya's voice bellowed in the small ramen stand as he poked his head of spiky white hair in, onyx eyes sparkling and he saw Naruto standing by the counter. Hey pervy sage. Naruto greeted quietly as he politely took the takeout bag from the ramen man, turning on his heels and heading out. Don't you usually eat in? Jiraiya asked, puzzled by the sight of the takeout bag. Naruto nodded as he shoved his change in his pocket and kept walking. Don't you usually talk? Yes, Naruto said, a bit annoyed. Sorry. Jiraiya backed off, deciding to change the subject. How was your day? Cheesy. He even put on his creepy smile. Fine. Alright. This is just too weird. What's wrong with you? Jiraiya stepped in front of the teenager, blocking him en route. I'm tired pervy sage, and I'm bringing Ba-chan some dinner because she just got out of a meeting. He answered his master in one breath. Bye. Naruto jumped off, leaving his master to relish in his jealousy. I wanna bring Tsunade dinner. And dessert. He arched an eyebrow and smiled his most lecherous grin, his mind wandering into private territory. Ooh. The knock on her door stirred her frazzled mind awake, getting her to open her mouth after it being closed for over an hour. Hey Ba-chan. Naruto chirped quietly as he came into her office, gently closing the door behind him. I brought ramen. Thank you, Naruto. Tsunade beamed tiredly as she lifted the foam bowl from the takeout bag and opened it up, Naruto scooting his seat over to her side and opening his bowl, handing her a pair of chopsticks. How did your meeting go? Naruto asked her as he lifted his first hot mouthful of noodles to his hole, slurping them up and waiting for her to answer. Well, the two places have been filled, at least one of them for sure isn't creepy. I asked for him personally. You'll get along great. But the other one, as creepy. Naruto finished her sentence, eyes squinting and pouty. I don't even know. She laughed and twirled some noodles on her chopsticks. Anything else? He was like a doting husband, taking the time to listen to her bitch. It was cute. I really hate old people. They're like cockroaches, they just don't die. Tsunade grumbled and slurped some of her own noodles, her frame melting as she swallowed. This is good. She smiled and turned to Naruto. Wow. He sniggered and started fishing for more noodles. What? They're annoying. And crotchety. She mumbled and held her chopsticks over her bowl, eyes staring at nothing in particular as she remembered that grumpy old woman tugging on her coat. I'm sorry she talked to you like that. Tsunade finally spoke, her eyes now on Naruto with his mouth full of noodles. She couldn't help but smile. He reminded her of a child. Naruto swallowed and looked back at her. It's okay. I'm used to it. Tsunade let loose a dissatisfied breath as she swiveled in her chair and took hold of his chin. You shouldn't have to accept stuff like that. You did nothing wrong. People do it anyway. You should have been here when I was younger. People would throw rocks at me and not let their kids play with me, and nobody ever told me why. His anger simmered down until all that was left was a grumpy face. Tsunade sat in her chair, still holding his chin. Sighing, she moved her hand so it cupped his chin. You should be sainted. She leaned in and gave him a peck on the cheek, then returning to her dinner. He's right. She should have been there. Kakashi laid in his hospital bed, faintly staring at the occupant of the bed next to him, a small amount of annoyance glinting in his open eye. The busty blonde woman reading his chart had long since redirected her attention to MHHH, Sakura-chan. The blonde teenager mumbled groggily as he tossed and turned in his sleep, the pillow he had in a vice grip looking ready to pop a stitch. Tsunade put Kakashi's chart back on the edge of his bed and strode over to Naruto. And how long has he been here? Tsunade quizzed as she watched her blonde boy roll and shove his face into the mattress, sticking and waving his butt in the air. Ever since I told him about his special training, he moved in saying he'd be ready at a moment's notice. Kakashi sighed and raised his book to his face, his eye still watching the boy wave his butt around. Alrighty. Tsunade sighed as she walked to the side of his bed, gently shaking his shoulders. Naruto. She called his name, getting a snore in response. Hey. She called firmly and tugged on the lobe of his ear. This got him moving. He shot up like a rocket, slapping a hand to his ear to protect it from further damage as he cast the blonde Hokage a glare. What was that for? Ba-chan. He gave her an angry pout. You were waving your butt around. I was afraid you were gonna hurt someone. Tsunade lied as she flipped her hair and planted her hands on her ample hips. Do you have a medical reason to be staying in my hospital? Naruto blanched at this, darting his eyes from his Ba-chan to his sensei. My shoulder hurts. He tried, rubbing his left shoulder in emphasis. Tsunade arched a brow and gave Kakashi a humored glance. It does, huh? Well, let me check it out. She started moving closer and Naruto started sweating bullets. But it's nothing worthy of the Hokage's skill and beauty to waste her time with. Can't a nurse do it? She sat on his bed and lifted his head by the chin and looking into his eyes. Why waste a poor nurse's time when I'm right here? The best medical treatment for the cutest patient. A hellish fire glinted in her eyes as her grip on Naruto's chin tightened. Just let me take a look. It'll be real quick, cutie pie. Naruto was seriously considering the open window as a much-needed escape. No matter how serious or affectionate she was being, Tsunade never called anyone over the age of 4 cutie pie, and even if she did know a 4-year-old, he highly doubted she'd go that far. Let's take a look-see. She slipped her arm around his neck and locked his head against her chest, moving him until his back was facing her. Her hands passed over his complaining shoulder with practiced ease, her fingers dancing from muscle to muscle. The contact made Naruto stop his flailing and choking to where he was just feeling her fingers flit across his back, stopping on his shoulder. Does this hurt? She asked him gently as she pinched high on his bicep. He winced a bit. He could feel she wasn't trying anything, and it made him realize he was actually hurting. Yeah. Naruto answered her, a bit surprised. She gave a nod and left his bicep, moving up to the cap of his shoulder and digging a gentle finger in it. How about here? He gave her a groan, nodding his head as she slipped him from his headlock. She moved to the base of his neck, honey brown eyes carefully scanning her boy over. She pressed 3 fingers down on the nape of his neck, getting him to melt under her touch. Right here, too, she whispered and he grunted a reply. Okay. Her hands left him but she stayed where she was, letting him rest on her front. He's not dying or anything, because training can be postponed if he is, Kakashi added from behind his book. No, I'm fine. Naruto defended, not leaving his position on his Ba-chan, it was too comfy. Well, that shoulder sounds serious, Naruto. Lady Tsunade hit all the right places. He mumbled as he turned the page. Well, Ba-chan's a doctor. She knows where to poke to make it hurt. I did nothing of the sort. She sounded outraged as she looked down on Naruto, who was still slumped against her chest. That was from you overexerting your undominant hand too much, fool. She growled the last bit and tugged on his ear. Ow. Now they'll admit me for that, Ba-chan. That hurt. Naruto pouted and tried swatting the older woman's hand away, but she was too fast. Kakashi watched on with his one eye, hiding behind his book, smiling under his mask as he watched the blonde. They bicker and tease each other like any normal, it's a stretch, mother and son. Sighing, he shook his head and returned to his book when Naruto started laughing from Tsunade thwacking his nose with her finger. If the rest of his stay were like this, he'd probably be able to live through it. Whiskey eyes smoldered with an apprehensive fire. Before her stood her shaky little boy. Well, he wasn't so little anymore, but he was still as much that cute little 12-year-old she met all those years ago. But now he stood a bit broken. His eyes weren't as bright, but sharp and intense. His shoulders were slumped and his normal fox-like grin was nowhere in sight. It was scary. Naruto. Tsunade started quietly, still not able to read him properly and unsure of how safe the waters she was treading His cerulean orbs snapped up to meet her honey brown. At least he was listening to her. How did it go? He stayed silent for some time, staring at his blonde Ba-chan, and she could have sworn his bottom lip had trembled, but she wouldn't dare point it out in front of his team. Naruto finally took a breath to speak. Not too good, Ba-chan. He got away, again. He muttered the last part angrily. Tsunade had to hold herself from jumping from her seat and wrapping her arms around him, to just bury him in her arms and never let him go. But again, he was a teenager, and a boy. Public displays of affection were a big no-no. What do you plan on doing now? Their eyes were still locked. We're not giving up, he answered for his team, Sakura nodding sharply off on the side. All right then. Over time, Jiraiya had learned the various in and outs of the famed big red building that sat in the center of the village, so well he could sneak into his blonde goddess's office without alerting the copious Anbu keeping invisible watch. And today being like any other day, the toad Sanin was making his slinky way to her wall of windows, reaching the first one he knew she always kept open for him. His calloused fingers got hold of the glass, ready to pull it open, but he stopped when voices sounded from inside. Are you sure you're all right? You can stay here for a while if you want. We can talk. It was Tsunade, her soft voice gentle and soothing as she watched the person in front of her carefully. But you're busy, and I can take the rest of the day off. Wow. She didn't sound the least bit desperate about it, not like the way she whines to Shizune. Jiraiya felt it was about time to reveal himself, pushing open the window and popping his head in. Have you become so uncivilized that you've forgotten how to use doors? Tsunade snapped as she watched him slide in, hands raised in a ready defense. She was clearly agitated. He noticed it was the kind she got when she was protecting something, or someone. I thought the window would be easier. I don't like it when the receptionist ogles me. Jiraiya gave his blondes a lecherous grin, avoiding the pen Tsunade threw at his head. You have a receptionist? Naruto quizzed with a head, blue eyes sparkling with childish curiosity, something only he could pee. Olive at his age. She's Shizune's replacement. What happened to Shizune? Naruto cried, totally lost. No, she's not. When I left her this morning she was fine. Jiraiya sniggered, quickly wiping his face clean when Tsunade sent him the glare of death, trademark of Tsunade Senju. All rights reserved. Shizune is just a little sick. She'll be back tomorrow, Tsunade explained through clenched teeth with her slender fingers rubbing her temples. Oh, that was a lame joke, pervy sage. Naruto blubbered and folded his arms across his chest. Anyway, take the day off, Tsunade. We could all go grab some lunch and talk. Jiraiya conveniently changed the conversation, sending his obsidian eyes over to his busty blonde, and then glancing at his sun-kissed boy. And don't say you can't because I heard you offer yourself up to Naruto. So, sweet cheeks, you hungry? Sweet cheeks. Naruto mumbled as he looked between the Sannin. Call me sweet cheeks one more time and I'll gouge out your eyes with chopsticks and throw them down an ugly old lady's shirt. With the threat known, Tsunade rose from her chair and walked around her desk, putting her hand on Naruto's shoulder and leading him out, leaving Jiraiya to visualize the pain. OWW. The pervert hurried after his blondes, lips sealed. Ooh, Sasuke sounds a lot like Orochimaru, Jiraiya mumbled distantly as he slurped up more of his noodles, Tsunade finishing her second bowl and went ahead and ordered another. Naruto was right in front of her when his fourth steaming bowl was placed before him. He does. Tsunade sighed and played with her chopsticks while Naruto dug into his ramen. He just seems so far away, you know. Like no matter how hard I try, there's just this enormous gap between us that I don't think I can fill. His hungry pace slowed as he stared into the golden broth. Jiraiya on the other end did the same, remembering how horribly he had failed when it came to his friend. I know what you mean. He breathed and started drinking his broth. Sitting in the middle, Tsunade was handed her third serving. She looked at both of her companions with sad eyes before she took her first bite. History repeats itself. Both of them looked to her as she twisted her chopsticks and took a bite, the two immediately coming to a telekinetic consensus. It was of great surprise when the monk raced into her office, sweaty and smelling of blood. His words were panicked and hurried, but his point made it across. They were coming. Alert the 20 newly formed cells. Shizune sharply nodded and hurried off, Tsunade's eyes concentrated on the floor near the monk. Chiraku. From his place kneeling on the floor, the monk's shaved head shook back and forth. Even him. Tsunade had the most violent urge to chew her thumbnail off, but held herself back. The Hokage couldn't show weakness. Thank you, monk. She swiveled around in her chair and listened as he took his leave. Finally, when the door came to an irrevocable close, Tsunade let the heavy breath out she'd been holding for what seemed like years. Like a tin can, she folded into herself, hugging her shoulders as she buried her face in the folds of her shirt, taking deep, shaky breaths. It was like lead had settled in the pit of her gut, weighing her down. She could feel it rising in her throat, stinging and tingling her esophagus as the hot burn of tears met her eyes. Stop. Damn it. Stop. Tsunade growled to herself as she sat up, wiped her eyes, and swallowed the lead in her throat, grunting it down. Flashes of Naruto's face sped behind her eyes, his wide, happy smile, and those bright, hopeful eyes. She planted her elbows on the desk, holding her head with her hands. Will you stay? I don't think I can. Jiraiya made his way out of the shadows of her office, grim features set in his face. Are you serious? Of all the times, you pick now. She only realized after the fact how angry she sounded. If they come knocking on the door, who's gonna keep Naruto safe? What do you think we did when we were away? I wasn't teaching him how to knit, Tsunade. I know that. She roared viciously and met his eyes, her honey turning a dark whiskey. Don't doubt him. I never said I did, Jiraiya. I'm just. Her anger simmered down and her words failed her, and once again, the lead sagged her down. Worried. Jiraiya smiled and walked over to her desk, eyes soft and lost of the anger they recently held. To death. Tsunade breathed softly and let her eyes close, the lids suddenly feeling so heavy. Poor Mama Bear. You work too hard and you worry too much. It's a reasonable amount of worry, he's still a kid. And it scares me that sometimes I'd be sending him right into the laps of the people who are hunting him down. So yes, Jiraiya, I'm scared out of my mind. Her gaze was hard as her eyes pierced his. Jiraiya didn't move from his spot. his brow knitted in the same kind of worry his female counterpart held deep inside of her. I know. His lips parted and let the whisper fall out, getting Tsunade to soften her gaze. Do you? He nodded slowly at her quivering words. I do. The silence was one of deep understanding, something the two had with each other often. He stood with his head lowered and she sat staring at his soft, vulnerable face. It was heartbreaking for both of them. I'll check on him before I head out, okay? She let out a low rattle, closing her eyes and smiling. Please. The orange-clad shadow clones cluttered the training field, all roaring and gritting their teeth as they focused all their energy into tearing the leaf in their hand. Come on. One more. With another chorus of grunts and roars, the clones pressed on with their chakra. Over near Yamato's ritual circle, Kakashi raised his eye from his book when he heard the snapping of twigs off in the forest behind him. How goes it, Kakashi? The Junin didn't need to turn around to know who it was, the deep voice enough of an ID. He's already starting to get tears. The clank of Jiraiya's sandals on the hard earth grew louder as he made his way over, giving Yamato a quick nod in greeting. Are you heading off on another intelligence-gathering mission, Master? Kakashi asked, nose still deep in his book. Jiraiya nodded as he watched the horde of Narutos turn their heads when they noticed he was there. Pervy Sage. Came a thundering chorus of greetings from the boisterous blondes as all of the clones disappeared and one ran over to him. Where to this time? I have some sources near Stone, I guess I'll head over there. The sage smiled when Naruto finally bounded over to him, a happy grin painting his face. Hey, kid, how's training? Naruto caught his breath and swallowed. Good. I almost got the leaf thing down, so soon I'll be even more badass than I already am. The teenager giggled and scratched the back of his head. Well, I wish you the best of luck, kiddo. When I get back, you show me what you've got. Where are you going? Naruto panted and wiped his face on his sleeve. To gather some intel, and check to see if there are any more of those Akatsuki creeps crawling this way. Jiraiya put on the face he used to hide things from the teen. A broad smile and bright eyes were enough to keep the wool over his eyes. Hey, then we can get some ramen or something. What is it with you and food, kid? Well, this stuff makes me really hungry. Jiraiya let a bellowing laugh rattle through him. Okay, we'll get food. Now get back to being badass. Naruto giggled and raced back to his designated training area, crossing his fingers and reassembling his army of clones. Kakashi looked at the toad sage with an expectant eye, knowing the man never really dropped in like this unless it was something vital. Tsunade asked if I could check in on him before I go, she's worried about him. Worried about what? A pair of Akatsuki attacked the fire temple early this morning, and like any mother hen, she's clucking her head off. Under his mask, Kakashi was smiling at the analogy. I've noticed she gets like that too. It must be a girl thing. Jiraiya laughed as he started walking away. But Kakashi, seriously, Jiraiya leaned in near Kakashi. Please keep track of him for us, I guess. Kakashi nodded and watched the big man leave, the smile under his mask growing. Lord Jiraiya, Tenzo. The Junin snapped his head away from the small army of orange-clad ninja before him to the whisper of his name from behind. The Hokage made her easy way over, no evident rush in the even sway of her hips. How is he? He's getting better. Her feet made no sound when she finally came into his circle of ceiling, and he realized even with his Anbu training, he wouldn't have heard her approach if she hadn't called out his name. He figured old habits must die hard. Good. Tsunade wasn't even looking at him. Her deep honey-glazed eyes were focused on the mass of Narutos before her, still oblivious to her presence. I'm going to need him for something, so on a scale of 1 to 10, where would you put him as ready for a mission? With this new jutsu on board ready for him to use in emergencies. Tenzo squinted his eyes to block the sun his Hokage was standing directly under. He and Naruto had shared this pose once before when the teenager had stopped, much to the Junin's surprise, for a drink of water. And in that short minute, his silhouette nearly matched Tsunade's. The way her chin cast a shadow on her neck, the same way his did to him. It was uncanny and a little haphazard, but his training sharpened his observation skills. I'd place Naruto at about a 5 right now. What? Tsunade closed her mouth very quickly after her outburst, almost obviously checking to make sure her voice hadn't carried. Only a 5 after all this training. With her temper under a bit more control, Tsunade set her eyes back on Tenzo, glaring a bit as she recognized her grandfather's stare behind those eyes. Well, he already had trouble forming a regular Rasengan normally. Quote, whoever said that boy was normal? Tsunade laughed momentarily, more to herself than anyone else. Right. He would laugh back, for politeness' sake. But, with adding his chakra nature in the mix, it's requiring a bit more concentration and effort. Well, not just a bit, more like much more than he's ever had to do. The Hokage gave a small nod, her eyes once again leaving the Junin to focus on the sunny blonde a ways away. He'll get it. I believe in him. Before Tenzo could snap his eyes to meet hers, she was gone, leaving only a tiny puff of dust in the wake of her imperceptible movements. She must know something I don't. Tenzo grumbled and returned his focus back on Naruto, who was looking at him with that little dumb face of his. Was someone just here? Where did you go? You know you have work to do. Shizune scolded the older woman like some nagging mother. Tsunade walked past her and rolled her eyes, slipping off her coat and hanging it on the back of her chair. Lady Tsunade, are you listening? Yes, mother. Tsunade snapped as she held up her head with her hand, putting on her best grumpy face and staring at her assistant. Don't give me that face. Between you and Naruto, I swear, she continued grumbling some other unintelligible thoughts while, miraculously, Tsunade reached for her pen and the first paper on top of the large stack growing in strength each day. You know Shizune. Tsunade started as she scribbled down some things on the paper, not even looking up as she waited for her assistant to calm herself. Yes. Wait for it. You need to calm your tits, girl. As if nothing had just been said, Tsunade signed the paper and reached for another, not even giving her assistant a glance. Not that she needed to. Tsunade could totally picture the brunette's face in her head. What? Did you just say that? Yup. You need to take a chill pill or get laid or something, hun. You're always so uptight. I'm really worried about your health. Shizune was silent in her shock, dark eyes bulging at the audacity of her mistress. All the while Tsunade was sneaking out, chuckling lightly to herself as her clone began reaching for the next piece of paperwork. Yamato Taicho. It's too hard. Naruto whined loudly enough to get his babysitter to cringe. You've almost got it. Tenzo shouted back, anything to get him to stop making such loud noises. But it's not working. No matter how hard I try, it's just not getting to where it needs to be. The kid thought his captain couldn't hear him, idiot. Are you seriously whining? A loud, roaring female voice bellowed from a tree nearby Tenzo's circle, taunting and arrogant. Lady Tsunade. Baa-chan. Naruto squinted his eyes tight to see through the heat haze and distance, making out the shape of one of his favorite people. I decided to see if I could be of any help, seeing as how you look about ready to tear ass outta here, Tenzo. Her smile was warm and friendly, platinum in its mirth. Thank you, Lady Tsunade, you must be clairvoyant. He chuckled as returned to his watch as Tsunade sauntered over to her blonde boy. Hi Baa-chan. Stop yelling. I'm right here. She bopped him on the head, a smile never leaving her lips as she watched him rub it off and smile for her. What are you having trouble with? Tsunade asked as she handled Naruto's battered hands with her own, healing as she went. Getting the wind to mix in with the Rasengan, it's really hard. Naruto pouted and wiped his sweaty brow, looking to his Ba-chan with pleading eyes. Have you tried imagining sharpening a blade inside your head? He cocked his head to the side like a little monkey. How do you know that? I have wind-natured chakra too, but I ever rarely use it anymore. When I use the chakra scalpel, it works perfectly. Cool. I didn't know that. Isn't being a wind-type badass? Tsunade rolled her eyes and chuckled softly. Sure kiddo. Did you have to cut the paper and everything, too? Tsunade nodded. My grandmother taught me, since she was a very big wind user. I cut paper, leaves, tree branches, and a rock when I was older. That was fun. Like she had gotten lost in her memories, Tsunade's eyes drifted from Naruto's to somewhere around the horizon. Anyway, I thought I'd swing by and help you out, seeing as how I have nothing better to do. You've always got paperwork. I said nothing better. Her eyes held a moment of frost, then it melted, returning to the warm honey Naruto had come to love. Right. Anyway, how do you do it? Well, imagine the blade thing and then. The lesson dragged on for almost 2 hours, the length from the Sannin having to repeat and dumb down some things for Naruto, slowing a bit at crucial parts. Then the actual exercise started with Tsunade exploding with wind while Naruto focused on his Rasengan, watching how she manipulated her wind and incorporating her style in his own. Kakuzu would die still feeling the prickling pain of Senju and Uzumaki wind chakra deep in his muscles and nerves, amplified by the overwhelming mass of chakra that little blonde twerp had unleashed. As she sat in her oversized chair, slowly trudging through her massive stack of paperwork, she could feel a small flicker of wind on the back of her neck. The stirrings of her battle instincts made her stiffen in her chair and her eyes darted inconspicuously from her paperwork to the door. Nothing. Her whiskey eyes left the door, lingering for the slightest of moments until her conscience told her it was nothing. But her hand just didn't seem to have the heart to let the wisp of air go, so she put her pen down. Leaning back until her back hit the smooth black pleather of the chair, the busty Hokage let out a long, sleepy yawn as she checked the clock. Good God, it's already 9. Tsunade rubbed the back of her neck and let a pout spread across her face. It was Sunday. She shouldn't be allowed to work on Sunday. Shizune should have at least let her sleep in until like 12, but of course that was completely out of the question. I'm hungry. Just as Tsunade swiveled to get out of her chair, the wind came back, stronger now, and cold as it made the hair on the back of her neck stand on end. That is pissing me off. Suddenly, big arms wrapped around her shoulders and one big hand covered her mouth, silencing the surprise. Gasp that came from her lips on contact. She threw an elbow for her assailant's face, making contact with a cheekbone. A pained grunt landed on Tsunade's cheek, but the strong arms didn't waver, and soon enough, consciousness was quickly fading. Damn it, she moaned as she tried releasing the genjutsu that had just been placed on her, but knew from the feel of the chakra, it wouldn't be easy. Soon enough, the Hokage was unconscious in the arms of her attacker. It was a groggy awakening, and her eyes were bleary when she opened them. There was a pale light in front of her, something like candles flickering in and out of her peripheral. She moved her hand to wipe a cold sweat from her brow, almost slapping herself when she didn't feel restraints on her limb. What the hell? Snapping open her eyes and searching the walls of the room before her, Tsunade jumped from her seat and scanned the entire room. Hey! She shouted, hard voice booming in the small living room, which she noticed to be very familiar. Closing her mouth, she took a step towards the couch she was just sitting on, picking up the unmistakable scent of pervy sage. Is the ramen done? Naruto. Oh, crap. She's awake. What the hell did you do to me? Quote. Put that over there. Squirt. Jiraiya. She was more than livid as she made her way into the dinky little kitchen her boys were holed up in. Now Tsunade, Don't be upset. Jiraiya was duly ignored as she stormed up to him, grabbed him by the collar, and brought her face right into his. Did you kidnap me? Tsunade seethed as she bored holes into Jiraiya's onyx eyes, watching him sweat as her fists tightened around his collar. We had Shizune's permission, Naruto explained shakily as he came over, hands on Tsunade's fists and trying his best to lower them and his master. Tsunade gave the teenager an incredulous look, loosing her grip on the tall man in her hands as she stared the blonde down. What is that supposed to mean? Tsunade was basically hissing now, readying her hands for Naruto. She said it was okay to take you out for dinner tonight because it's Mother's Day. Naruto blurted out all at once when her hands got dangerously close to his throat. What? With her hands shaking so violently as they were, it took time for them to finally fall back down to her sides. Jiraiya took a step closer to her and wrapped his arms around her shoulders. Feel familiar? Get off me. She wiggled out of his grasp and over to Naruto, turning to glare at him. I'm not a mother, Naruto. She looked like she was about to say more, but stopped when her eyes found Naruto's face. Well, you've been more of a mother to me than anything else, Ba-chan. So I wanted to do something nice for you. At those words, Tsunade's heart melted and she turned to look at Naruto and Jiraiya. That's so sweet, Naruto. Thank you, honey. She wrapped him in a hug and gave him a light peck on the cheek. But you. She spun around at a violent speed, slender finger aimed at Jiraiya's heart and eyes steely as she stared him down. Never, ever again do you get to manhandle me like that. You know I always hated that genjutsu of yours. I am Hokage and I will punish you severely. A few more seconds of her death glare and she turned back to Naruto, who happily stood near the boiling pot of ramen. Ready to eat. With a happy little grin and oven mitts a bit too big for his hands, Naruto bounced on his feet at her nod and readied tea. He pot. Jiraiya collecting the bowls as the team worked in an assembly line fashion. That smells divine, guys. Did you make this yourselves? Two triumphant nods. Awesome. Naruto walked Tsunade over to a little table, a pretty yellow tablecloth covering it in 3 places set. He pulled out her chair and tucked it in when she sat, and moved to grab something from behind the couch. You didn't have to do all this for me, Naruto. No, I wanted to. He sat down next to her, a bouquet in his hands with 2 wrapped boxes, one looking fairly decent while the other was wrapped in newspaper, with Naruto's unmistakable scrawl of Baa-chan on it. These are for you. Tsunade smiled warmly as she took the flowers from him and watched as he placed her presents on the table in front of her. You can open them now if you want. Oh, he was eager. She could see it all over his face. He was basically on the edge of his seat, face close to hers as Tsunade looked over the 2 boxes with a glint of teasing behind them. Well, I thought about opening them after dinner, but since you're so excited, she tore open Jiraiya's gift as he made his way in with 3 bowls of hot ramen, eyes sparkling with mirth as he watched her eyes light up. Oh, Tsunade held the unwrapped box with careful hands, eyes sparkling with childish delight as she read and reread the label. Alcoholic dark chocolate. She was beginning to froth lightly at the mouth. Thank you, Jiraiya. Tsunade hugged his waist as he placed her bowl in front of her, the steam rising into oblivion. Open mine. Open mine. Naruto was shivering in his seat, eyes big and anxious as Tsunade ripped off the newspaper. She came to find a box with a shiny red lid on top. With careful hands, she lifted it off and looked inside. Oh, Naruto. One hand went inside the box and brought out a silver locket that gleamed in the light hanging overhead. Tsunade marveled the jewelry, turning it over in her fingers and prying it open. That's from the hot spring we went to after we got you to be Hokage. And there's something else at the bottom. Gently as she could, Tsunade put the locket down on the napkin beside her and dug deeper in the box, her Hand coming across something along the lines of metal. Naruto, I love this. It's so beautiful. The frame of the picture was painted brass, a forest-like green. It was in the shape of leaves and tree branches, intertwining with another and making this vine-like pattern on the entirety of the frame. And the picture was even more of a sight. 12-year-old Naruto stood next to a leaning Tsunade, her arm around his shoulders and a mouth full of dango on both of them. Naruto had sauce all over his face and Tsunade had a stick dangling from her lips, 2 dumplings already devoured. She was reaching for his face with a napkin, smile wide as she held him tight so he couldn't get away. He was laughing with his face pulling away from her hand, eyes closed in glee as he tried pulling free from her grasp. Thank you, Naruto. Jiraiya. This means a lot. Tsunade wiped a small tear from her eye and engulfed Naruto in a hug, holding onto him for a good 10 seconds and whispering a thank you. All right, she chirped as she pulled away and ushered Jiraiya to sit. Let's eat. For a legendary drunk, you sure know how to spill your guts. He was trying to be funny, but she wasn't exactly in the mood for jokes, seeing as how she was momentarily throwing her innards up. Shut up. Tsunade managed between breaths, then going back to her vomiting. Jiraiya rubbed her back and felt her muscles contract and tighten as everything came out. He quickly grabbed one of her pigtails before it swung into the stream of sick that flowed from her. Let's go find someplace to rest for a bit. As she wiped her mouth, Tsunade looked up at Jiraiya, tired eyes searching his face for an emotion regarding their earlier talk. Nothing. You know, I think I've told you this before, but you must not have been listening. You're dumb. You do dumb things and dumb people shouldn't go charging off to do very dumb things. Oh, how sagely you are, princess. Jiraiya's chuckle was deep and loud, shaking her a bit from the vibrations traveling through the wooden bench. The moment turned to silence, and soon it became tense as Tsunade started fiddling with the ends of her shirt. Just don't die. Jiraiya didn't look at her, just focusing his eyes more intensely on the fence a few yards away. Of course he knew she would say that, but what he wasn't expecting was the emotion, the tremble in her voice as the words came out. That kind of weakness from her was like getting a fish to walk around on land, it just didn't happen. That didn't mean he didn't find it funny. Stop laughing, you idiot. I'm serious. If I lost you too. What? You'd cry. Ah. That makes me all fuzzy inside, Tsunade. An angry pout spread over her face, and her eyes turned to lasers as she bored them into his head. Hush. Jiraiya smiled, looking over his blonde princess one more time, knowing this might be the last time he got to be close to her, to take in the nice smell of her perfume, to watch the light wind lift her hair. I love you. It was too heavy for his jaw. His tongue went rigid the moment the thought of the words came to him. No, you'll put her in a panic, don't. You were never meant for happiness. Thank you. For what? He watched the way her nose scrunched in confusion, how her eyes twinkled in the dimming light, the highlights of honey bursting from the sea of whiskey. She was a sight to behold, a muse with fingers like silk, hair woven of gold, a smile blessed by angels themselves. I love you. For making me a better man. I'm tougher now because of you, Tsunade. She laughed, tiredly and wearily. Her eyes left him and she spread herself out on the bench, hanging her arms on the back and crossing her legs over again. He decided it was a good time to leave, so he hefted his scroll onto his back and turned his cheek to the north, staring at the sky. Jiraiya. He stopped, heart pounding from his foiled escape plan. It would have been so cool, like the ones in the movies. Out of all the women you've claimed to have rocked, how many did you actually love? Jiraiya's cheeks darkened at the tone of her voice as she passed over her words. Claimed is such a tiny word, more like proven. Quote. Whatever. Just answer my question, damn it. She set her lips in a line, that cute little upset face she'd been making since they were kids. Jiraiya figured she wasn't even aware of it. None of them. Tsunade snapped her eyes to meet his, incredulous. Seriously? None of them. He shook his head. They weren't who I wanted. She snapped her mouth shut at this, knowing where his words would take them soon enough. I love you. She wanted to say it, but the sound of her heart pounding was enough to block out any and all thoughts traveling from her brain to her mouth. A cool breeze passed through the part of the park they were in, lifting some dead leaves and scuttling them to and fro, and rays from the red hoe. Sun started to trickle beneath the horizon, calling for an end to the day. Tsunade. I love you. Like a child that had been caught with her hand in the cookie jar, Tsunade sat on the bench with her head low, face a mess of red and hands fiddling with the hem of her shirt once again. His knees rattled for a millisecond and he could have sworn his heart stopped for a moment, but it was the greatest moment of his life. I love you too. Then don't go. Just stay with me and Naruto and we can deal with Akatsuki some other way. Just please don't go. Her tears were like bombs going off inside him, the worst things he would ever see. They stung him and he was standing 5 feet away, watching his beloved fall apart. Please Jiraiya. Don't go. I want you here with me, stay please. Her shoulders were shaking so hard she couldn't breathe and her tears blurred her eyes so much she couldn't see. But I'm the only one who can. I don't care. She shook her head and some of her tears went flying, glistening in the sunlight like diamonds. What about Naruto? You're putting him in danger by being selfish. Jiraiya stepped forward, eyes focused on Tsunade as she wiped her eyes, a new expression crossing her features. I don't care if I have to set the world on fire, I will keep that boy safe. Those bastards will have hell to pay if they want to come in here and take him from me. A fire with the wrath of hell behind it flashed in her eyes, lighting them up. Jiraiya was taken aback. In all the years of him knowing her, she had never been that firm, never been so dangerous with just her words alone. It was that fire he had been waiting to see brew in her. What I'm doing is the same as you, only more proactive. I'll break your legs. What? I'll break your legs so you won't be able to walk for a month. I'll break your arms so you can't weave signs. I'll grind every bone in your body to dust with my bare hands if that's what it'll take to keep you with me. Stop it, Tsunade, you're starting to cry again. Quote, I don't care. She shot up from the bench, anger rolling off her in waves as she stepped over to Jiraiya, intent on fulfilling her earlier promise. Jiraiya caught her by the wrists and pinned her against his chest, feeling her squirm against him and bury her face in his chest. Please, please, please. Her face deepened into his chest, wanting so hard to just fuse with him and have them together forever. Better me than you, Tsunade. He needs you more. How do you know that? Jiraiya sighed and smiled, waiting for his blonde princess to look up at him. Have you seen the way he looks at you? Do you even realize what you do around him? You're his family, his surrogate mother, and no one else will ever be able to come close to what you can do for him. Jiraiya, with his large hands, took Tsunade by the shoulders and held her firm in his grip, eyes pouring into hers. If we lost you, who knows what us barbaric men would do in retaliation. But you would bring a calm to him. I know you would hold him up until he could do it on his own again. Tsunade nodded and wiped her eyes, sucking up some light congestion. I promise to be as safe as I can, and I promise you two will always be on my mind. I really love you a lot, Tsunade. Just remember that. He kissed her on the lips, pulling her in and holding her. Then he vanished, leaving Tsunade standing there, watching the sunset and praying for the first time in a very long time. I love you. It was hard to just sit in her chair and scribble her name on paper after paper. She was numb on the inside, enough to where she didn't even hear her ball of sunshine come in through the door with his team in tow. Hiya Ba-chan. He was too loud for her right now. She just wanted it to be quiet. Too bad her thoughts couldn't project into reality. So I want a mission. Can you give me something cool? Like go rescue a small town from a roaming gang of bandits. He kept on with his dumb list, and Tsunade just wanted him to leave. Her head was still swimming from earlier that day. Sakura stood behind Naruto, watching her master carefully. Kakashi did the same, moving towards Naruto to try and control him. So, Kanya, Ba-chan. His face was right before hers, bright blue eyes watching her sit there, still like a statue. She thought if she were quiet enough, he'd go away, like when you play dead before a bear, they lose interest. But this kid was no bear, just a stupid, precocious fox. Ba-chan. He pushed his face closer to hers, repeating her name louder each time he said it. That stupid nickname he always screamed at the top of his lungs in front of dozens of people, embarrassing her to no end. Naruto, stop doing that. Sakura whispered wearily from her place behind the blonde, watching as her master's shoulders shook in anger. Naruto turned around to face the pinkett, eyes unconcerned as he turned back to Tsunade. Next to Sakura, Sai stood awkwardly as always. He watched, his beady black eyes analyzing the Hokage's body language, the way she closed her eyes in frustration as Naruto continued to pester. He knew she was getting ready to explode, at least that's how his book described it. Ba-chan. What? Tsunade finally snapped, pushing herself up and out of her chair, hands firm on her desk as she glared at Naruto. What could possibly so important that you have to interrupt me as rudely as you do? I'm in the middle of work, I can't just stop and bend over backwards just to give you what you want, Naruto. I have a village to run. Quote. But I would if you wanted me to. He was silent, his face still ingrained in shock, his eyes wide and growing empty as he continued holding the gaze. Now you're quiet, after I have to yell at you for being annoying. What did you want? A mission. Tsunade dug through her piles of paperwork, fingers furiously digging until she found what she wanted. Here. She shoved the piece of paper in his face. A mission to keep you busy. Now go. But he didn't move. Naruto stood there, the mission paper hanging limply in his shaking hand. His head, so thick and dense, tried bringing reasons as to why his most beloved person would snap at him like the way she did. He had done this many times before, and her worst would always be a mild annoyance. But this was violent, this was mean. I never meant to be so cold, you didn't deserve that. Did you go deaf or something? I said go. But it's only AD rank. Her face was terrifying in its anger. Motions that needed only milliseconds to occur lingered on her face. Her eyes widened and her brow knit into a deep anger, and inside her mouth, her teeth were grinding together so hard her jaw was beginning to hurt. That's the mission I've assigned you. You either take it or I take your headband and send you back to the academy. Her growl was deep and vicious, and her eyes seemed to burn him like cigarettes. Naruto, come on. You're obviously irritating her. Kakashi reasoned, reaching for Naruto's arm and pulling him back. Get out and get it done. She hollered as they left her office, each humbled, walking away like whipped dogs. Is she all right? Shizune asked as she walked up to the team, face full of worry from the amount of yelling she'd heard. Kakashi nodded his head, his visible eyes sheepishly smiling. She's a bit cranky. Naruto was being a tad annoying. Shizune absently nodded, looking to Naruto who hadn't stopped walking. He was halfway down the hall. It's been a long day, and she hasn't quite been herself since this morning. My apologies. It's quite all right, Shizune. I understand her stress. With that, the Junin left with his two ghostly charges after the bright orange boy now turning the corner to leave the building. Shizune watched them leave, waiting a good 5 minutes before she let herself breath again. Cranky is not the word I'd use. She mumbled as she replayed the heated shouts she could hear through the wall. In all the early mornings and drag-filled days, and no matter how many stacks of paperwork she endured, Shizune had never heard or even picked up on a trace of malice in her master's voice when Naruto came to her. He seemed to brighten her day, but this was very strange indeed. This meant something was deeply wrong with the Sannin. She gently knocked on the door and cracked it open, peeking inside to see Tsunade holding her head in her hands, strands of her golden hair dangling from between her fingers. Lady Tsunade. Yes, Shizune. Her heart wasn't in the greeting, she barely breathed it. Do you want to take a break? Maybe get something to eat. I can't eat. Startled, Shizune stepped inside, closing the door behind her. Why? Tsunade sighed heavily and fell back in her chair, hands covering her face. I've lost my appetite. Shizune nodded. Tea maybe. I can't drink. Another understanding nod from the quiet assistant as she watched Tsunade's hands slide down her face, slowly and painfully. Did that really just happen? Tsunade asked, words full of hurt as she closed her eyes. Yes, it did. I could hear you through the wall. The way the Sannin's breath came out was startling, like she was dropping a heavy ball on her feet and imploding from the strain. What was that all about? Shizune was in her mother mode, nitpicking the older woman like a nagging old woman. I don't know. And the older woman was reverting back to her early childhood instincts, whine and blow everything off. Shizune made a hum noise in her mouth. It was low and suspicious. What did he do? He was just being himself. Tsunade stretched back in her chair, rubbing her temples and keeping her eyes closed. I feel like a complete bitch. I have to agree with you. The assistant added under her breath. Tsunade wore a look of slight outrage, and almost how dare you face. You're the closest thing to a mother that boy has and you just snap and go off on him like that. I can understand to a point, but you've always been able to tolerate him. That, earlier, was something new. Shizune busied herself, her hands organizing papers and books into neat piles and stacks, her eyes never meeting Tsunade's honey. I know how high you hold that boy, I'm not stupid, milady. And that lets me know something is very wrong. Now she snaps her eyes up, and they're dark and hard, very different from the usual Shizune. Tsunade is at a loss for words. No one had ever, in her entire life, grown such a spine and told her what's what to her face. But it was comforting to know the woman cared. Now you either tell me or I can put a rush on tomorrow's work. Quote. No, don't do that. Tsunade pleaded, voice small like that of a punished child. Then talk about it. I know it goes against your unspoken rule of emoting as a sign of weakness, but it's just me. She smiled lightly and put a hand on the blonde's shoulder. A pregnant pause stuffed itself in the room, holding Tsunade's words in her throat, clogging it up until she felt the need to take a breath, just to make sure she still had the ability. Jiraiya left for rain last night, the assistant removed her hand, and now Tsunade's shoulder felt cold where it used to be. Oh goodness. And she returned to her busy work, fixing a stray book here, using her kimono to wipe a drop of tea off the desk there. I told him I loved him. That got her to stop. Shizune turned sharply on her heel, eyes happy as they met the blonde's. And he said he loved me too. I am so proud of you. Planting her hands on her hips, Shizune was beaming from ear to ear while her master just sat with a brow creased in confusion. What? Oh come on. Her hands moved from her hips to the desk and she leaned in, her weight on her hands and face inches from Tsunade's. In all the time I've known you, he's been there. Either hitting on you or protecting you or whatever it may be. She moved back, eyes gleaming with something that looked Machiavellian. You two are something like soulmates. Shut up, Shizune. It wasn't a pleasant tone. My apologies, milady. With that she left, the tiny smile on her face never wavering. Tsunade waited for a good minute before even moving a muscle, her breathing remaining low and heavy. Damn it. She opened her bottom drawer with her foot, leaning over in her chair and reaching down inside. It's like having a little sister. She cracked her bottle open and waited for her sunshine to return, hoping he wouldn't be too upset. Her cheeks were a rose red by the time Naruto made his way back into her office, a little sweaty and nursing his shoulder, blood seeping in his jacket and spilling out into his hand. It wasn't AD, he shouted, his voice a tad shaken and weak from blood loss. I'll love you forever. What? Tsunade was immediately sober, nearly vaulting over her desk to get to him. I'll like you for always. Where was Sakura? Her hands were on his wrecked shoulder, tearing back the outrageous orange sleeve to get to his wound. Turns out you sent us on a gang raid. He stopped to wince, muffling a cry when Tsunade's fingers pulled out the tip of a shuriken lodged deep in Hai's shoulder cap. And they were all Rouge Shinobi, Ba-chan. Sakura got captured and then I got separated from Kakashi-sensei and cornered and ow. He tore himself free from her hands and whimpered when the motion hurt more than the initial wound. Get over here. Tsunade barked, rushing over to him and defeating the purpose of her growl. I'll love you forever. Are the other two okay? Naruto nodded, sucking up the snot in his nose. They went to the hospital and I came to you. Quote. Obviously. Tsunade managed to hold herself from rolling her eyes. I'll like you for always. Why didn't you go with them? She was close to calling him an idiot, but after her earlier fit, she knew he wouldn't do well with that. Naruto went quiet, his eyes blank as he watched Tsunade's fingers start to glow in a numbing jutsu as they dug for more shards. Well, she looked into his eyes, worry and a bit of impatience tinting the flecks of whiskey in the pools of honey. As long as I'm living, I don't trust the other doctors. It was quiet, the way his words came out, something you never heard from a boy like him. And it had Tsunade completely stuck, frozen in place as she watched his face, studied his eyes. I wanted you. When 2 weeks go by with no news, my insides are flopping around like gymnasts. I sit at my desk, rubbing concentric circles on the wood with my finger. I stare out the window, my eyes counting each drop as they fly past me. The rain, it's an omen. Non-stop the entirety of my wait, and it's agonizing to lead myself to believe in the sign of death. No, 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 I will not go there. So I sit back down and just stare. I've already finished all my paperwork, startling Shizune to no end with my speed and lack of complaint. TS, and now I have the day to myself. But I have no idea what to do with myself. I can't visit Naruto. I don't want to have to blatantly lie to his face about where Jiraiya's been, because he's been asking and I've been lucky so far with being able to lightly brush it off. But I can't depend on that for much longer. Besides, he should be back sometime this week. Hopefully. Stop. I pinch my arm, twisting the skin until it sends shingles of pain up and down my arm and shoulder. This is torture, sitting here waiting. I'm listless and devoid of any attention span whatsoever because I'm constantly thinking of him. Is he okay? He better not be injured. Did he get lost? Like a doting wife, Shizune chuckled a few days ago. She told me I reminded her of one of the wives of soldiers off to war, waiting by the window for even the flicker of a shadow his size. She doesn't know what she's talking about and I dismiss her. But today, the rain is heavy. It comes down in sheets, heavy like wet wool as it slams down on the roof and blurs my vision through the window. That's one occupation of my time gone, and now my temper is roaring and ready to explode like a landmine. And people have begun to notice. They tread more carefully around me, weary of the landmines. Who would have thought, with every human imaginable aware of my irritation, that a toad would set me off? The little plump thing was stuck to my window, barely holding on in the pouring rain. It took Shizune's hand on my shoulder to realize I was crying, hard rocking sobs as I stared at the little green toad on the window sliding down the slick glass. Lady Tsunade, what's wrong? I can't stand being rude to her, but I just couldn't talk. I couldn't answer her for the life of me. I stood up quickly, too fast, and the outlines of everything got fuzzy as the blood rushed out of my head. My hands, they were cold and shaky. They knocked piles of papers over and spilled my cup of tea, but then they latched onto the glass, holding it firm like I would die if I let it go. I opened the window. My hair was instantly soaked, strands of it stuck to my face as the rain moved to my shoulders. Further I leaned out. I could faintly hear Shizune hollering something about me catching my death of a cold, but I paid her no mind. Come here, I whispered to the toad as I lightly pulled it off the window and into the glass, blessedly overcoming my natural female fear of the creature and coming back in, shaking my head like a dog, and I watched the glistening orbs of water fly from the ends of my hair like diamonds. I looked down in the glass to see the toad was looking up at me, big black eyes dominating his head as he stared. What was that all about? What's in the glass? Shizune came over, her face in a chastising cast as she came closer. Once she got a look inside the cup, she jumped back in fear. A little eep of a noise escaped from beneath her hand. Why do you have a frog? As girly as she was acting, she still managed to send me a scolding glare. It's not a frog. What? It's not a frog, it's a toad. Look. I tipped the glass a fraction of a degree so she could see without having to get close. Only the toads have those bumps on them, frogs are smooth. Shizune nodded, just not liking the whole situation. Whatever. She acquiesced as she walked away to fetch me a towel. She said. I didn't want one. It felt good to have some shiver in me, some beads of rain sitting on top of my hair. Gently, I put the glass on my desk and sat back in my chair, the initial anxiety of seeing the stranded toad long gone as I undid my pigtails and ran my fingers through my tresses. That felt good, the scratch of my nails on my scalp, a kind of massage for my head with the coolness of the rain soaking in deep to put all the fires out. I decided to leave my hair down. I hadn't worn it that way in forever and I forgot how nice it felt. The smell of my shampoo easily wafted into my nose. Looking back at the cup, I saw the toad pop his head out and search his surroundings, big eyes falling on me. I let my chin rest on my arms as I scooted back in my chair, nearly at eye level with the thing, and we stared at each other. His pupils were dilated wide to where they engulfed his iris, turned his whole eye black in terror. It's okay. You could call that a bit crazy, but at the moment I really didn't care. Please don't start talking to the frog, milady. Shizune came in with a towel, a new frown on her face as she looked me over in my insane state of talking to the toad. It's a toad, Shizune. And he's scared. I refocused my eyes back on the little thing, determined to calm it down. Do you think a little sake would kill it? Shizune was very quiet after I asked that question, eyes narrowing and brow creased in confusion. She walked over to the desk, draped the towel over my shoulders and planted her hands on her hips with a heavy sigh. His tolerance might not be as high as yours, so let's just pass on that. Her hand went for my cup. Don't. And then she stopped and pulled her hand back, eyes closed. How about I get Izumo and Katetsu to go find a place for him? I think being back outside will help the little guy. The toad fell back in the cup and I felt a sigh deflate through my chest. I gave Shizune a nod and starting drying off with the towel, wrapping myself back in my green coat after a chill passed over me. Shizune picked up the cup and looked down in it for good measure the creature wouldn't pop out at her. Oh. I heard her breath, her eyes soft as she stared down, not even realizing she'd said something. What? I stopped drying my hair with the towel and blew damp strands out of my eyes, letting the cloth hang on my head. Shizune's eyes snapped to meet mine in surprise and slight panic. I had noticed her slip. It's nothing. She's been a horrible liar ever since she was a little girl. And I knew that face all too well, the face of regret and sadness, just not to the degree of normalcy. It's dead, isn't it? She nods. It must have had a heart attack. she says soberly and walks out of my office, and still has the decency to hand the cup off to Azumo, telling Katetsu about a little burial. And it's the same moment Lord Fukasaku appears before my desk, a heavy-set look of grief on his green face. Please, please, please no, but he goes on with his news anyway, pausing at parts to let my cry. My big stupid toad had fallen off the window. And I wasn't there to catch him.